Well, that's exactly what happens in antigen-antibody reactions. When antibody is added to antigen, if it's soluble antigen and not part of a cell or something like that, they cross-link each other, forming a large lattice-like structure, a crisscross structure, which eventually gets so large it can no longer remain in solution. So it falls out of solution or precipitates. And that's one of the characteristics of antigen-antibody reactions. If the antigen is soluble, like say a soluble protein, and you cross-link them with antibodies, they will make a large complex which will fall out of solution. That's precipitation. If the antibody is a particle, like say a red blood cell, those aren't in solution, they're in suspension. What happens if you take a test tube with red blood cells in it and sit it on the table? What'll happen? In saline solution. Well, they'll just settle to the bottom of the test tube in a few minutes, like that, because they're falling out of suspension. They're not in solution, they're in suspension. That's not precipitation. But what happens if you cross-link those red cells with antibodies? Even if an antibody that reacted with the red cells. Well, the red cells would all clump together and fall out of solution much faster, like a little bowling ball, bonk, like that. So you could still identify this clumping together, and we call that by a different name. We don't call it precipitation, we call it agglutination. So particles, when cross-linked with antibodies, will agglutinate. Soluble molecules, when cross-linked with antibodies, will precipitate. Oh, by the way, just so that you don't get mixed up and figure you're never going to figure out which one is which, if they give you an example, I'll give you a shorthand way of getting these right all the time. There are only two particles. There are only two things that are ever used in examples on exam questions that are particles: red blood cells and latex beads. Latex beads are little tiny microscopic plastic beads on which you can stick proteins or carbohydrates. If anybody's cross-linked these particles, they will clump together, and you can see this visually. See this clumping. That's agglutination. So while there are lots of other particles, they only use two of them ever for examples on exams: red cells, latex beads. So if it's a red cell or a latex bead, and they cross-link it, it's called agglutination. Everything else is precipitation. Trust me on this one, it's true.